So is marriage even relevant anymore? It's a question a lot of us seem to be asking in 2025.
It really is. In a world that's just constantly changing, how we work, how we connect.
Exactly. It makes you wonder if this ancient institution still holds up or if maybe, well, it's outdated.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just a passing thought for many people, and probably for good reason.
Yeah,
The whole landscape of relationships, of commitment, it's shifting so fast.
totally. And that's what we're going to do today. A real deep dive into that coin, is marriage outdated in 2025? We've pulled together some really interesting sources to try and unpack this.
We'll be looking at insights from 9 couples therapists. They were featured in a today.com article. So that gives us a kind of clinical, thoughtful perspective.
Right. And then on the other hand, we pulled a really lively, sometimes pretty contentious Reddit discussion from Kenya.
Yeah, that one gives some very different, quite raw public takes on marriage. Starkly different, really.
And finally, we're going to look at how actual wedding traditions are changing, using some insights from Legacy Hill Farm. It shows how people are, choosing to celebrate or maybe redefine marriage today.
So our mission here is basically to pull out the key takeaways, the surprising bits from all these different viewpoints.
Yeah, give you a shortcut to understanding this evolving picture of love and commitment without getting totally overwhelmed. Okay, let's dive in.
All right.
So, why is this question popping up so much right now? I mean, historically, marriage was often about really practical stuff, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Finances, property, having kids. The today.com article really drills down on this.
But in 2025, that just looks completely different for so many people.
Precisely. The article makes it clear. You have choices now. You can have kids without getting married.
Or get married and not have kids.
Right. Or explore non-monogamy, keep your finances separate, your home separate. The old necessity factor just isn't there in the same way.
And you definitely see that in the numbers. That today.com piece highlights a huge demographic shift. People are marrying much later.
Get this. In 2022, the average age for a first marriage in the U.S., around 28 for women, 30 for men.
Wow, that's a big jump from, 26 and 28 in 2010?
Yeah, and way up from 24 and 26 back in 1990. It's a steady climb.
So fewer people getting married overall, but here's the interesting part you mentioned.
Divorce rates have actually gone down, which seems counterintuitive at first.
So why is that happening?
Well, Margaret Clark, she's a PhD at Yale. She suggests a big driver is more women pursuing careers, education, getting that financial independence.
Okay, makes sense.
But once that started happening, she says, it just became more normative to wait. Less pressure, maybe more deliberate choices.
It does feel like people are being more intentional, right? Choosing partners when they're maybe more established, know themselves better.
Exactly. And Dr. Clark also notes, marrying later might mean people know what they're getting into more.
Which, logically could lead to lower divorce rates. So the takeaway isn't just when people marry, but maybe why and how. More intentional unions.
And that leads us right into this idea of the value of commitment itself, regardless of the timing.
Right. How did the therapist define commitment?
Well, Dr. Clark, she put it simply, having an intent to stay in the relationship for the long run. Pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
But she also emphasized the value in being understood and accepted and cared for. That creates this sense of safety and continuity.
That feeling that someone's truly got your back.
Exactly. Knowing someone's there and also knowing that you are a responsive, caring individual for someone else. It's reciprocal.
That's powerful. The author of the Today piece even shared something personal, didn't she?
She did. She talked about how the weight of the commitment, that feeling, plus the memory of their wedding guests, actually helped pull her and her husband through tough times.
So that public declaration, the shared memory, it actually had weight. Interesting.
Definitely speaks to the power of that ritual, for some people at least.
So when you asked the therapist directly, is marriage outdated? What was the general consensus? Was it a yes or no?
It was mostly a no, but it's not outdated. It's just evolving. Redefining itself.
Okay.
Like Chantres Parks, a PhD, she basically said marriage will never be outdated because people value commitment and security. But she added that being flexible with the traditional structure, that brings more joy now.
Right, not so rigid. What about others?
Melissa Hummelt from BetterHelp said something similar. It's evolved, still meaningful, offers benefits, emotional, legal, financial. But crucially, she said, it's no longer a necessity. Depends on your values.
So choice is key.
Exactly. And Marnie Foreman, a PsyD, she noted society has shifted. more focus on personal fulfillment, careers, cohabitation is more accepted, not marrying is more
Or
accepted.
the institution itself.
She says it isn't outdated. People are just more deliberate. And she listed benefits: better health, support, less isolation, shared experiences.
Hmm. Seems like a pattern here.
Yeah, Adam Borland, PsyD from Cleveland Clinic, he kind of summed it up. He said whether marriage itself is antiquated is debatable. But long-term, committed, loving relationships, definitely not antiquated. It's up to the couple which path they take.
Makes sense. Anyone offer a different angle?
Sharon Spiegel, PhD, added something interesting about stability. She said in such an unstable world, marriage can provide that stability, something very grounding.
Okay, I can see that.
But she also contrasted the old for life assumption with the modern let's see if this works attitude. She warned that too much freedom to leave, outside of abuse could maybe lessen the richness of the relationship.
That's a really interesting point about stability versus freedom, and it kind of leads us into the next big theme, doesn't it? These modern challenges and, frankly, really high expectations we now place on marriage.
Oh, absolutely. What might surprise you is just how high those expectations have become.
How so?
Alexandra Solomon, she's a PhD at Northwestern, she points out that decades ago, success was often judged by, the man providing and the woman handling the home and kids. Simple metrics, in a way.
Right, very defined roles.
But now, we often want our partners to be everything: our lover, best friend, co-parent, intellectual equal, maybe even our life coach.
Wow, that's a lot to put on one person.
It is. Dr. Solomon says marriage is now both more fragile and more precious than before. Fragile because of the high demands, precious because of the potential for deep intimacy. But it requires, as she put it, an up-leveled set of skills.
So it's not just about finding the right person, it's about having the skills to build that connection.
Precisely. It's about co-creating it.
And unfortunately, as one therapist pointed out, the burdens aren't always shared equally, are they?
No. Matt Lundquist highlighted that in straight marriages, women often still carry more weight with the house, kids, and that sort of emotional labor, even if they're also working full-time.
That's a persistent issue. And for queer couples.
He noted that for them, marriage historically was, and sometimes still is, a vehicle for discrimination. So they face a whole different set of external pressures and challenges.
So many layers here. It really seems to come down to intention, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Ann Rosenspector, PhD, she asked the key question: why are you getting married? Not society, not your parents, but you.
Because it's not a magic fix for problems.
Exactly. She says marriage isn't some magical lotion. What's much more important is the ability to communicate and resolve issues and be on the same page. The skills again.
Right. The preparation, not just the party.
Yeah. And Jared Anderson, PhD, he summed it up really well. He said, look, if marriage means rigid gender roles, unequal power, restrictive definitions, then yeah, maybe that version is outdated.
But if it's something else?
But if it's a commitment to personal and shared growth, building a life, supporting dreams, standing by each other through challenges, all within a supportive community, then he sees it as incredibly valuable.
It's about defining it for yourselves.
Completely. Dr. Solomon urges couples to ask, how do we create a marriage that honors both of our yearnings and aspirations? It's about building that way while respecting the I.
So the therapists offer this really nuanced, sort of cautiously optimistic view. It's about designing your own commitment.
Right. Empowering couples, really.
Okay, so that's the clinical perspective. But what about, raw public opinion, which can be less measured?
Definitely less measured. Which brings us to that Reddit thread from Mark Kenya. Things got pretty fiery over there.
Yeah, you mentioned it was contentious. How did it start?
The original poster, username NoTruth94004, just threw it out there. Marriage is not worth it in 2025.
What?
Full stop.
Wow. Oh.
Well, with one exception. Unless they said it's a religious one.
Okay. So secular marriage is doomed. Religious marriage might work. What was their reasoning?
They basically argued secular marriages are destined to fail. It's just a matter of when, not if.
And why did they think that?
They blamed it on a combination of things. Sexual liberation of the 70s, coupled with feminism and technology. They felt this made it, and I quote, nearly impossible for women to stick to a marriage when the worst happens.
That's quite a claim. Any other points?
Yeah, pretty blunt stuff. They argue women don't need men for provision anymore because of financial independence. They can raise kids alone. Though the OP did question the emotional and spiritual side of single motherhood.
Okay.
And they also claimed women can easily get physical needs met elsewhere. So without religion, There's no incentive for them to stick through hard times.
Hmm. And they contrasted this with men.
Sharply, they said men live by a code of duty, obligation, and responsibility, whereas women live on vibes and feelings.
Mm.
If she ain't feeling it no more, then it must be bad.
Oof. That sounds pretty stereotypical.
Yes. And they added, women want a wedding, not a marriage. They prepare for being a bride, not a wife. Really painted a specific picture.
So according to this poster, the only hope is religion.
Pretty much. But only for true converts, not just people going through the motions. Because those people, they argued, are led by obedience and adherence to their faith, not just feelings.
Wow. Okay. That's a very strong, very specific perspective. How did Reddit react? I can only imagine.
Predictably, there was a lot of pushback. Many users immediately brought up, the number of stories floating around the internet from these so-called men of God marriages.
Right. Pointing out hypocrisy or failure, even within religious contexts.
Exactly. Users like Kim77 and Travel Story Queen basically said success is purely a matter of partners deciding to work it out. And it has got nothing to do with religion, but individuals, putting the power back on the people involved.
So individual agency versus the framework.
That was a major theme.
Yeah.
DeMarcus Gotchius put it very bluntly. Marriage doesn't work because most... Nope. And then Yellow Butterfly 69 offered a more cynical take on why men might seem to stick it out longer in bad marriages.
Oh, what was that?
They suggested men often avoid initiating divorce just to avoid the admin work and not look like the villain, not because they actually want to stay. Plus, men often benefit most from an intact home regarding domestic chores.
So convenience or image, not necessarily commitment. That's a perspective. Was there anything positive in the thread?
There was. Loud Scene 1118 offered a complete counterpoint, much more romantic. Marriage is about love. It means I won't leave if you don't. I love you for all that you are always and forever.
A more traditional, heartfelt view.
Definitely. And another user, Nebja, kind of tried to synthesize things, listing the historical glue. Religion, society, male provisioning, and arguing that, those things are weakening.
So this Reddit thread, it really shows the raw emotional side of this debate, huh? A huge contrast to the therapists.
Massive contrast. It really highlights how personal and charged this topic is for people. The truth, whatever it is probably messy and somewhere in between all these viewpoints.
Okay, so we've talked about if people should marry, the value, the challenges, the fiery debates. Let's shift gears now to how people are choosing to celebrate it, or perhaps not celebrate it in traditional ways.
All right. This brings us to the Legacy Hill Farm source, which talks about time-honored wedding traditions that are gracefully taking a back seat.
Making way for more personal choices. What kind of traditions are fading?
Well, for one, the big formal wedding party. It's becoming more optional.
Really? So no bridesmaids or groomsmen?
Not necessarily none, but couples might opt for maybe just a maid of honor and best man, or have VIP guests who get special treatment but aren't, standing up there in matching outfits.
Interesting. That probably saves on stress and maybe costs, like florals.
Exactly. Foregoing wedding party florals was mentioned. Also, those long receiving lines where you shake everyone's hand.
Oh, yeah. Those can take forever.
They're being replaced by more organic interactions, just mingling naturally throughout the reception.
That makes sense. What else?
Formal invitations sent by mail, becoming more of a luxury item.
Ah, some more digital stuff. Websites, emails.
Yep. Digital invites, wedding websites, email save the dates are really popular now. It's seen as more efficient and greener, too.
Okay. Anything else taking a backseat?
The super long engagement seems to be less common. Engagements are apparently getting shorter.
Really? Why is that?
The source suggests it reflects a desire for promptness in starting their new life together. Some venues, like the one cited, even held planned weddings in under 3 months.
Wow, that's fast. What about the guest book?
Also evolving. Instead of just a book, people are doing creative alternatives, signing a piece of art, a time capsule using digital platforms, more interactive.
Cool. And the dress? Still always white?
Definitely not. Brides are embracing colors, patterns, and even unconventional attire, or having multiple outfits for the day.
More self-expression. I like that.
Me too. And the cake cutting ceremony still happens, but maybe less of a big production.
Also.
Couples might choose simpler, more interactive desserts. Think dessert bars, assorted mini cakes, stuff like that. Less focus on that one moment.
Informal speeches, are those still a thing?
They're often being replaced by shorter, more heartfelt, brief toasts, or sometimes moved to the rehearsal dinner, keeping it more intimate for close family and friends.
That sounds less awkward for everyone involved sometimes.
Probably. And lastly, even the day of the week isn't sacred anymore. Saturdays are still popular, obviously, but
People are doing Fridays, Sundays.
Fridays, Sundays, even Thursdays are gaining traction. Apparently, you can get way more from the experience, maybe better venue availability or pricing.
So the underlying theme here is personalization, right?
Absolutely. The source really champions couples who make their wedding a testimony of their unique journey together, not just following a script.
It really shows people shaping the traditions, not the other way around. Okay, so wrapping this all up, we've looked at marriage today from a few different angles. It doesn't really seem like people think it's outdated exactly.
No, not outdated, but definitely undergoing a massive transformation. We saw the demographic shifts, people marrying later.
Right, and the therapists emphasizing commitment, but also those really high modern expectations and the need for skills.
The huge contrast with the Reddit debate,
Hmm.
the arguments about secular versus religious marriage, duty versus feelings, super intense stuff.
And finally, seeing how couples are literally reshaping the wedding itself, making it way more personal.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is that underneath all of it, whether you choose to marry or not, how you celebrate that basic human desire for deep, committed connection, that still seems to be there.
Yeah, it's maybe less about the institution itself and more about being deliberate, being intentional in how we build relationships.
Yeah.
So the final question for you, listening, what does all this mean for you? Thinking about all these perspectives on duty, fulfillment, those changing roles, what parts of commitment and partnership really resonate with your idea of a lasting connection in 2025?
And maybe how might you build it better, as one therapist put it, whether that's within the traditional marriage framework or completely outside of it.
Yeah.
Something to think about.